Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from the law office of Alan Butel here in Las Vegas in downtown. Alan is a criminal defense and civil litigation lawyer who lets us use one of his rooms in his offices to broadcast the show. We appreciate him doing that. And we'll do a little commercial for him maybe later on that says, if you need a lawyer, call Alan Butel. He's in the book. This show is about guns-related politics and self-defense issues. Fired Up is available on AM radio and on YouTube. You are watching the YouTube version at the moment. We may be changing our format a little bit in the future. Those of you who watch every week will notice the sign that says on the back that says, call me at this number and that number. Our website still isn't working. We're still fighting with that. So you can reach us through our Facebook page if you would like. That is Fired Up with Bob Irwin on Facebook. Anyway, we are doing a little bit different show tonight. When Lenny was on last week, you remember Lenny Davis, my favorite ex-Fed. We got into discussing terrorism a little bit, and we kind of jointly decided it is time to do a show exclusively on that. So we are dispensing with our normal who shot who and was the shooting good or bad for this issue. A couple of you that follow me on Twitter got notes about this show. So Lenny and I are going to discuss the terrorism problem, and we will return to our regular format next week. In light of what happened, particularly in view of President Donald Trump's remarks about defeating terrorism and so forth this week, I'm sure those of you that follow all of this stuff recognize that we are now declaring war on ISIS and the associated groups, on Muslim terrorists. And what I want to do is just open this up. Lenny's been spending the week pulling his sources and whatever to see where we're going. I think the president's new directive to the military and so forth will change a lot of what's happening. Instead of kissing somebody's butt, now he basically said, well, he did say, the job of the military is to find the terrorists and kill them. And I am delighted to hear that personally. But anyway, I want to turn this over to Lenny to kind of update everybody on what is happening in the field of counterterrorism, what the risks are to the United States and particularly Las Vegas, because that's where the bulk of our listeners are. A little bit later, we'll be talking separately about what you can do if you're caught in a terrorist attack, because that is obviously crucial if you are a CCW holder. Even if you're not, there are things you can do to prevent loss of life. Along the lines of you are the first line of defense for yourself and your family. And now, under these circumstances, you may be the first line of defense for your country. So, that being said, I'm going to turn, those of you who don't know Lenny, have to give a little bit of your background before we start this, in case somebody out there hasn't heard of you.
Well, I don't know. They've watched the show for the last 4 or 5 years. They've seen me occasionally. So.
Seen you, yeah. They've seen the beard come and go. And,
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Lenny, and we'll discuss stuff later on.
Thanks, Bob.
Charge.
My name's Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with Department of Homeland Security. I've spent the last approximately 8 years as a contractor, a subject matter expert for the U.S. Department of State in their Global Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. It's been my pleasure to go all over the world and train anti-terrorism troops for friendly governments, their law enforcement, their special weapons and tactics teams, their commanders. So I did a lot of road time in the past 8 years. I've got to meet some really good people. I've met the guys who are on the front line of terrorism. These guys are doing their job every day. They're involved in it. We are blessed that we have not had some of the terrorism that has hit other countries. And it's been my pleasure to help those guys try to stop the threat. Terrorism is on the rise. Like Bob said, we were talking, if you all heard about President Trump and his remarks. President Mattis, maybe I got ahead of myself. Secretary of
2024.
2024. Secretary of Defense James Mattis, he said this week that his job was basically to make sure that the United States military is the most lethal force on the planet, and that those guys in ISIS and Al Qaeda are getting pinched pretty hard. You go, well, that's going on in Iraq and Syria. What has it got to do with me? I'll tell you exactly what has got to do with you. When those guys feel that pressure, they filled the vacuum when we left Iraq. They filled the vacuum. They took over large parts of Syria, the ground game in Syria, because of the civil war going on in Syria. It's been going on for years. And they've had this, they thought they had a state, and they almost did. It's scary how big a grip and a piece of territory they took over, which was also full of natural resources, oil. That's how they were funding their operations. Well, when you clamp those guys down, and those guys have been kicked out of Mosul in Iraq, the city of Raqqa, which is their de facto capital, is within days probably going to be rid of them, thanks to our president and our U.S. military and special operations people. And like Bob said, we stopped kissing people's butts, and now we're kicking it. And when you put that pressure on these groups in Syria and Iraq, the only thing they can do is they can't fight you on the battlefield. They're not going to fight us on the battlefield. They know they can't win. The only way they fight us is in a city, in an urban environment where there's civilians, where we can't bring the full force of our, we just can't bomb them back into the Stone Age. So where do they fight us? They fight us in places like Barcelona, Spain, France, Britain. They're going to be, there have been attacks. We've been very lucky since 9/11 because we have been very diligent, and we've been able to disrupt many attempts to do terrorism here. You sit there, and if you read the news at all, you will find that there's several guys that I see an article about, seems like about once every couple of weeks, I see an article that so-and-so was charged for material support, or he was had gone with an undercover FBI agent and was trying to buy bombs and explosives and weapons to go out and commit an act of terrorism here on our soil. So it's here, and we've just been very lucky and been very fortunate that we've been able to interdict it. We have, God bless our law enforcement and our military and our intelligence services, because they are the people that keep this wolf at bay. But it's going to happen. Bob and I have had, if you've watched us over the years, we've had many discussions about why here in Las Vegas, and here in Las Vegas we're a soft target. We have very good intelligence here, very good law enforcement, but they can't be everywhere at once. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today, is what you can do. Like Bob said, you're going to be your own first responder. You really are. But what you can do in the overall problem to help assist law enforcement and federal agents in quelling terrorism here. This is your homeland, folks. And if you think for a minute it's not barking at your door, you need to take a real serious look around.
Well, there should be no more surprises like there were in San Bernardino.
Well, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about
terrorist
that. That was a very foreign terrorist attack, and you know the thing is the former administration. One of the things that I'm going to talk about, I might as well get it off my chest right now. One of the things that I have had a huge problem with, especially with our former administration, is the fact that if you didn't have an email or phone conversations, a direct tie to someone like Osama bin Laden who ordered this attack, they said it was a lone wolf attack. That the person was, usually the term that the media uses and the former administration uses is they were self-radicalized.
Yeah.
You can get on Al-Qaeda's website. Al-Qaeda is very, very good at putting an instructional magazine out, which they do, how to build bombs in your mom's kitchen. In 2004, in Iraq, some special operators took down an Al-Qaeda stronghold. They found documents in there, and once they translated the documents, it was discovered that Al-Qaeda was still pushing forward to do 9/11 grand 9/11 style attacks, but they were also saying, look, you can use whatever you have at your disposal to strike at the infidels. Where have we seen that lately? We've had vehicle attacks. This murdering bugger in Virginia, he used an Al-Qaeda, right out of the Al-Qaeda playbook, take a car and ram people. We had that in Barcelona last week, in two or three occasions, where they used vehicles, and they were kind of different than the guys in France, although they're saying, I read an article today where they had some interaction, not necessarily with the guys that did the Charlie Hebdo attacks or the concert attacks in Paris, but they have been some of these people in this cell had traveled to France. The good thing about this cell in Barcelona, there's been some of the members taken alive.
Yes.
So those are going to be, unlike in France where nobody got taken alive, they all went out. So in Barcelona last week we were talking about this. At that time there was, I think, 14 people killed and over 100 wounded in the La Rambla district in Barcelona with a single attack vehicle. The driver got away, which amazes me. He got away. They killed a couple of other of them. The night before, they tied it into about 75 miles outside of Barcelona. A house blew up, killed one and wounded another. And initially, they just thought it was some sort of gas explosion. But then further, when they really went through and sifted through the evidence, they found that was a bomb-making facility.
Right.
So we got very lucky, and I'll explain why. Because the next day in Barcelona, or in a seaport city not very far from Barcelona, 5 of the individuals who were in that got out of a van. They had run over some people in the van, and a female police officer engaged them and shot 4 of the 5 of them and killed them. Obviously, don't piss off a Spanish police officer. More power to her. They were all wearing what appeared to be suicide vests, bomb vests. I think what happened was they probably had the vests put together but didn't have the explosives, and a couple of days prior they were putting the explosives together. And sometimes, as you do when you make improvised explosives, you have an oops moment, and I think they had an oops moment. They have killed the driver of the original van in La Rambla. So it's it's a situation they're still investigating. It's always going to be something that they're going to reach out and get. I mean, if you think back to 2011 when the Navy SEALs killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, there was, not only was it to kill him, it was to garner all the intelligence. And and there was a treasure trove of intelligence. So there's going to be the same thing with this group. It appears though this was a sealed off cell, but that's yet to be determined. I couldn't necessarily, I don't have access to what it used to as a federal agent, so I don't really have a chance to go in much deeper than that. But at least for now, this cell is out of business. So we were pretty good with that. We were lucky. I mean, the Spanish people were very, very lucky. Had those guys completed improvised explosive vest, hundreds could have been killed. So in that respect, we got very, very lucky.
Yeah, there was some intelligence they released that the truck was a secondary thing, that actually they were going to blow up a cathedral with everybody in it.
Yeah.
Apparently, and they're all set and ready to go, and their bomb factory blew up. So they did the next best thing and improvised an attack right there.
And if you look back in the last few months, you had vehicle attacks, a couple in England. You've had a couple in France. There were some soldiers who that were attacked by a guy in a van in France about 3 weeks ago before this all came down. So it's a very easy target. Now, I noticed this morning in the local Las Vegas Review-Journal that because of all these incidents, they're stepping up the hardened security measures at downtown here at the Fremont Street Experience, and immediately after Barcelona last week, the county commissioners kind of they're going to put bollards up and down the Las Vegas Strip, so it will deter vehicles from running into people on the Strip. I'm just shocked that hasn't happened prior to this.
Well, I would expect there's some wacko out there, terrorist or controlled or self-motivated, who's going to look at that and go, wow, I've only got 3 more months to run down the sidewalk and kill people in Las Vegas. And the county commission, I understand, they're very concerned about tourism. If there's an attack here, it'll cost the city millions and billions of dollars and so on. But they're going to find it in their budget to do that. They obviously have to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We've had the experience of the one lady that crashed down the Strip, and we're certainly going to have the lookalike guys attempt to do that again. I've always viewed that and I was intending to pose that question to you, that we've got cities in the United States that are going to be the targets. Obviously, their best target they want is New York City because it's so symbolic. The second target is Washington, D.C., and there have been attacks, both places attempted or completed. Chicago is the next because of it's Chicago.
Yeah.
And a terrorist attack in the midst of all their crime problems wouldn't nobody notice. Another 8 people were killed today. That doesn't even come into Chicago's. But anyway, in Chicago, if you noticed, getting back to my gun thing, they have proposed some new gun legislation again to make criminals stop using firearms to kill each other and passerbys. But that's for next week's show. Obviously, one of the main targets is going to be where the great Satan actually lives, which is in hedonistic Las Vegas.
The modern day Sodom and Gomorrah.
We have had attacks tried here, I believe. I am amazed that one has not succeeded. Again, that's going back to Sheriff Gillespie and Sheriff Lombardo and the Fusion Center, and they have been really getting on all this stuff. Amazingly, the intelligence apparatus is working apparently pretty well. And they have started this campaign again. If you see something, say something. We're living in a society where we don't want to get involved. We just had a local murder here where several people knew who did it, but nobody wanted to say anything because I don't want to get involved, and this woman was raped and strangled or whatever. And I didn't want to say anything because, you know, I just mind my own business. Well, a lot of them, they're gang related, and they're minding their own business to save their own lives. And hopefully we're making progress on that.
Well, and
separate issue with the gangs.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head. You know, you have to be absolutely aware of your surroundings. You cannot just I can't tell you how many times do you pull up here in Las Vegas and you see somebody walking across the street. Yeah, they're watching the light across the street. Oh, it's time to walk, but they don't look to see if somebody's coming. They step off the curb. They're texting going down the street, and I'm just amazed at how oblivious they are. You have to keep your head on a swivel. You have to look around. You have to be aware of your surroundings. Now, if you're in one of these venues where there is a lot of people, you really have to be uber vigilant. You know, and it comes back to see something, say something. A lot of people think, well, gee, it's none of my business. We should all just kind of keep to ourselves. Well, let me explain something to you. See something, say something could have survived, possibly saved some lives in San Bernardino, because a neighbor of the terrorists noticed that they were working in the garage very suspiciously. They got a lot of deliveries from UPS, and after all this happened, the guy said, well, I thought it was awfully suspicious, but I didn't want to be sued. So here's the thing I want to tell you folks. If you see something, say something. Say it to law enforcement. They're going to go out and investigate it. If it turns out to be nothing, you're not going to get sued, because if Bob Irwin says to the FBI or to Las Vegas Metro, hey, I know this guy Lenny Davis, and he's awful suspicious character, one, they're going to go into the books and go, oh, it's Lenny, it's all right. But no, maybe. But the reality of it is they're going to go out and investigate it, and they're going to make contact with these people. And they're not going to say, well, gee, Bob Irwin told us that you are doing some suspicious stuff. They're going to say the very famous, you know, we got information, we've received some information, can we talk to you a little bit? And you know what? That's how you disrupt this stuff. You scare them off, you get them incarcerated. If they're building bombs in a garage and the FBI can prove that and go in there and go, well, let us walk around. Oh, no, they'll get a search warrant. So in that respect, see something, say something. I know it sounds like a Reagan era just say no, but it's very important that you think about that. You know, nobody's going to sue you for ever doing that. And almost virtually every terrorist attack that I have studied, and I've studied virtually every one that's come down the pike since 9/11, and even some previous, someone has seen something that was suspicious. When the first World Trade Center bombing back in the 90s, where they made bombs in New Jersey and got a rental van and drove it into the garage and detonated about 3 floors down, they took the license plates off the vehicle, thinking that wasn't going, that was going to be no way they could identify it. But there's VIN identification numbers on many major parts in a vehicle, and they can go back to the manufacturer and get that. They found out it was a rent-a-car, and they went out and they arrested these guys, and they talked to people in the neighborhood and go, yeah, those guys would be in the garage, and I don't know what they were mixing up, but it sure stunk. Here to me, working narcotics for all these years, if somebody came to me, I'd be thinking potentially a methamphetamine or cocaine lab. Anymore, it would probably be, hey, that's potentially a bomb lab. So see something, say something, guys. It's you know, it's what you have to do. You have to be your eyes and ears for law enforcement. If you're wrong, if it was misinterpreted, and what they're doing is a innocent act, nobody's going to come after you. The law enforcement's not going to say, geez, what a dummy. They're going to go, thank you very much. They may or may not come back to you and say it turned out to be nothing, or the next thing you know, the SWAT team's you're hitting your neighbors, because they've got enough probable cause for a search warrant. So it's so important that you become eyes and ears for everything. Law enforcement, the famous saying, cop's never around when you need one.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing here. They're spread too thin. You can't have a cop on every corner. So really, really, truly think about where you're at, what you're doing, and what you see. And if you see something, say something.
You have to. I mean, the terrorists have been here. There was belief that years ago in 2010, 2011, that a couple of the World Trade Center people that were on that aircraft had come in to Las Vegas and were here for a couple of days. We don't know why, because they're all dead. But the fact, I know that because we got an investigation, because they believed a couple of them came into the gun store.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal authorities came in and went through all the videotapes and so forth that we were doing. What does that say? I want to go. What does that say?
Snooze. Yeah, go ahead and hit that.
Okay.
Yeah.
They went through at the time, of course, we had videotape, and not everywhere for the security we have now because of lawsuits and things, but they went over all of the range waiver sign-ins to find signatures or known aliases, and nothing turned up to indicate they were actually there, but they had reason to believe two of them came into the store. We don't know whether they just came in and left or they came in shotguns. We don't know. But this has been going on. Las Vegas has been on the terrorist list for a long, long time. And, it's the same as if you're in a bank and as you're walking out, you see three guys wearing masks, carrying pistols, walking in the door. When you get clear of the bank, call the police. You would do that normally. If you see those same two or three people wearing all black with masks going in to a tourist bar or something that is full of people, what do you think is going on? All you got to do is turn off, instead of filming them with your cell phone, call 911, then go across the street and film them with your cell phone. It's amazing how quickly these can be disrupted. The cops respond, I'm always talking about the cops responding when seconds count, they arrive a few minutes later. But in this case of seeing something that looks suspicious, them arriving a few minutes later is great, because they'll prevent the attack from taking place. And if these guys look like they're up to no good, whatever the reason, call cops. They've got response teams set up for this in this county and in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Hotel security is on it. They've got all sorts of plans in the works. They can perhaps prevent it. And I'm as we get into this section of what to do if you're caught in the middle of a terrorist event, what you can do, I want to stop for a moment and talk about a thing I saw on television that just really annoyed me, which was Rand Paul. Rand Paul gave an interview right after President Trump's speech about his speech about supporting the military and going after terrorists and this and that and the other thing. And he announced no matter what the program was, he was a no vote to going after terrorists. He's not going to sign the budget to do that. He's not going to expand the military and help us or help our allies or whatever attack Raqqa and so forth and so on. That antagonizing, you know, poking the bear. They're in another country. They're not here. And I was, as a conservative guy, Rand Paul is obviously a very conservative guy. Him saying before he even saw what the president was trying to do, said he's a no vote. Mr. Paul, Senator Paul, if we don't fight them where they are now, we're going to be fighting them in Miami and New York City and Las Vegas. If we're going to have to engage them, they want to kill every American that exists. And you want to wait and let them fight us here instead of fighting them over there? That's not really cost effective. You know, I can't imagine what you're thinking. I know you're not a military kind of guy. I wasn't in the military either, sort of. But I was just shocked by this statement. I can't imagine that anybody in Congress, and I thought the president said it very clearly, if you don't vote, you guys, for the money to do this, you're putting the American people, you're putting our republic at risk of not existing anymore. There's a whole group of people out there that want to kill us. And for a politician not being able to recognize that we're under attack by radical Muslim terrorists, how could you not figure that out? Do you think if we don't attack them, they're going to leave us alone? Read the literature. They want to kill all of us.
They want the entire world to subscribe to the Muslim religion. And I have nothing against Muslims. I have some of the greatest friends that I have sweat and bled with that are good, faithful Muslims. It's not about religion, except in their radicalization of it, and they want the whole world to be Muslim. So, you know, terrorists, and you hit it on the head. Terrorists, we fight them there or we fight them here. Everybody said, well, we invaded Iraq, we didn't do it, we shouldn't have done it. You know, we just did that because Bush wanted to get Saddam Hussein out. I'm not 100% sure that we should have, but I can tell you one thing. What did it do? It drew all of these foreign fighters to Iraq where we could kill them. And unfortunately, you know, and here's the thing. This is going to be a long-term battle, folks. You know, yeah, we fought World War II in 4 years. Well, World War II was going on a long time before December 7th, 1941. And it still took a long time and a lot of lives. But you're talking about state versus state. You're talking about an enemy that is virtually everywhere and is stateless. So there is no country to go in. There's not a Germany or Japan to go in or Italy to go and invade and have a war with. You're at war and they pick the battlefields. So what do you do if you're caught in the midst of one of these things? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people out there, and I don't profess to be the best expert in the world of terrorism, but there's a lot of things you can do. The Department of Homeland Security has been a big program person, you know, a promoter of a program called Run, Hide, Fight. It's any kind of terrorist attack, active shooter, workplace violence, as they used to call it. It's an active shooter. There's one going on right now in Charleston, South Carolina. One person's been shot, last I had heard.
Yeah, police shot the guy.
Did they? Good. That's an active shooter incident. This goes for the same thing. It's run, hide, fight. So run. This is where being aware of your surroundings really comes into play. And like Bob said, if you see some guys running into a bar or a restaurant down the street and they're carrying AK-47s, wearing hoods, you know,
that's a clue.
That would be what we call a clue. For those of you who are as old as I am and Bob, that saw Clint Eastwood's very first Dirty Harry movie, and he said we knew he wasn't there for collecting for the Red Cross. So when you see that, get away from it. Get away from it. Get on your phone, yes. Dial 911. Be as good a witness as you can as you're going the other way. I will tell you, distance is life. When we teach tactical firearms, law enforcement, distance is life. The farther away you can get away from your adversary, the better chance that you have to survive that armed encounter. I saw something last week in the Barcelona. It made for riveting video where the female police officer killed 4 or 5 of the 6. I think it was four of them. Yeah, she killed 4 of them of the 5 individuals. You can clearly see, and here's a guy with his camera up here doing this. He's videoing this thing. He is about 30 yards away. It wasn't a long-range lens or anything else. He was holding his cell phone up, and here is this guy, one of the terrorists, and he's got what appears to be a suicide vest on. And here's this guy filming him as the police officer shoots him. Now, she shot him. He shot him several times. He fell down, got back up again, and she shot him again. Basically because, as we all know, handguns are not notoriously good, killing machines. One shot stops. The thing that you have to grasp from that video is, yeah, it's great video, but had that been a live bomber, that guy was taking that video, we'd have never seen that video, because he was 30 yards away from, most of the time they're 4 and 5 pounds of high explosive. He would not have survived. We may have at some point seen that blast, but he wouldn't have been there. So get away. Run away from this thing. If you can get the farther away you can, if you saw something pertinent, tell law enforcement.
Run. If you're caught in the middle of something like that appears to be a terrorist attack or a bank robbery, you can do it the same way. You get out of the way so you don't become part of the problem. If you're armed, don't draw your weapon as you're running away. There are police coming toward the situation. You're going to be caught running at them with your gun in your hand. You will not have time to explain you're not the bad guy. Unless you have a bad guy in front of you that you are shooting at, leave your gun concealed.
I'm going to talk more about that in the fight part of it. You're absolutely right.
The law enforcement coming in, the good guys, the white hats are running in. They want to save the world. Trust me, I've been a young cop. You've been there. We're going to save the world. Look out, bad guys. I'm out of the academy, and I don't quite know what I'm doing, but here I come.
Yeah, and they gave me a gun and a badge.
So don't get mistaken for a terrorist. The run, the hide, as he brought up with this guy filming a guy being shot at who's wearing a vest, hide behind solid cover. There is cover and concealment. You want cover, because fragments and nails and all this stuff go flying. And the fight part, well, I'll let you go ahead and we'll
a couple of things that I want to talk a little bit on. I'll kind of finish up with hide. If you're in a building, you're trapped in a building, get in a room, barricade yourself in, stack furniture against the door, anything you can to stop these guys from getting entry into that room. If they can't get into it, and we've seen a lot of this with active shooters. I know in was it the Brooklyn Navy Yard back east, the Navy Yard a couple of years ago, or no, Washington D.C. Navy Yard. There were some people that barricaded their doors so the guy couldn't get in, and when they get frustrated and they can't get in, they just move to the next door when they're looking to kill people. So the other thing that you need to think about is turn your damn cell phone ringer off. Turn your phone off. The last thing you want to do is be, the guy comes in, you're hiding pretty good, and the guy gets away. I saw a full debrief about the Kenya mall shootings.
Yes.
And there was a woman in there that hid for several hours, and these guys were all around her. And she was terrified that her cell phone was in her purse, was several feet away. She couldn't get to it to turn it off, and she was afraid that the cell phone was going to go off and set this. So hide, get behind, as Bob said, get behind cover. A wall is not going necessarily, unless it's reinforced concrete. It's not going to help you. It won't stop bullets. It's just going to conceal you. So do a little bit of that. The last resort is fight. You can't get away. You can't hide. You got to fight. Okay? You are in a fight for your life if you're unfortunately in a situation like this. As Bob has already pointed out, if you're a concealed weapon holder, I don't care how well you're trained. I train guys at a anti-terrorism team level. I'm pretty good even for an old guy with handguns and rifles and weaponry. But if I'm carrying a handgun and I know that my adversaries have rifles, you never take a handgun to a gunfight or a rifle fight unless you absolutely have to. Don't attempt to engage these guys until there's just no other recourse. They're usually heavily armed. They've got explosives on them. You have to be very careful. When we train anti-terrorism troops, we train them to shoot for the head. Why? Because if you shoot center mass and the guy happens to have a suicide vest on, and it doesn't happen to be a high-grade, super stable plastic explosive, if most of the explosives that are used are around the world are made, they're pretty unstable stuff, and they work very well. But if you hit it with a handgun round, it's going to set it off. So it's really a last resort to fight. Okay. And I don't care how well you're trained, never push a bad position. Don't push a bad position and put yourself out there. I run the whole gambit. I see guys for years that go carry everything from, and I do the same thing. I carry a small handgun most of the time. Some guys I know carry, multi-shot, larger handguns, 3 or 4 magazines, and they think they're invincible. Well, the reality of it is you're still armed with a handgun, and your adversary has got a rifle or a bomb or a machine gun. So you're already at a disadvantage. I don't care how well you're trained. Only fight if it's an absolute last resort. Just like Bob said, you go pulling out your gun and go running after some guy. What are you doing? Number one, you're in your regular street clothes. How does a law enforcement officer, and like you said, we were all young and dumb at one time.
Here comes one now.
And here's a guy I'm gonna, and we've seen it for years with police officers, undercover police officers, where uniform didn't know who they were. They didn't have a raid jacket on. They were undercovers, or they went to engage somebody because they were off duty, and they got shot and killed by their own guys. So be very, very careful about that.
There's one other point I wrote in my notes, that the situation with a terrorist is different. If you are trapped and you have to fight. Everything I've talked about on this show has always been use verbal warnings if possible, etc., etc. In a terrorist attack, he is simply intent on killing you. If you yell, drop the gun, he will simply kill you right then. So you've got to, if this is a terrorist event, it is so unlikely that he will heed your warnings. If he does, it's going to distract you. So you take a second look while he draws his gun. In this case, you're dealing with a murderer. You must put him down right then with lots of bullets, chairs, whatever you're hitting him with, lots of blows with the baseball bat. If you warn them, they will not give you a chance. You have to treat them like a rabid dog that you can't reason with when he's running at you, yelling stop at a dog. Although I had academy students do that once. Drop the teeth. They don't react. Like terrorists are intent on killing you. They're going to come after you. You have to disregard what we do in the civilian world and look at what is done in the military world. You can't go to a terrorist. You don't go in Raqqa and hear the guy pops up and you yell, drop the gun.
If this guys are out there and they're shooting people and they're coming towards you and they're shooting people and you have a weapon, this is where we've said, and I don't know how many millions of times in the last few years when I've been on this show, you and I have both told people, you have to train with your weapon. I see people here in Nevada that carry CCWs. They shoot their gun every 5 years when they have to qualify. In between, they don't shoot their weapons. And just going to the range and putting rounds on a paper target is training, but it's not complete training. So get good training from someone. Your life someday could depend on it. At the end of the day, you got to realize the other thing too is if you say drop the gun, what if this is a guy who doesn't speak English, doesn't speak your language? They found that out in Paris because some of the guys that were there in Paris were all from North Africa and some of them didn't speak French. So they didn't understand some of that. So they had a hard time communicating with them. So again, you know, like Bob said, this is different than an everyday self-defense. A guy is mugging you or breaking into your house, that kind of thing. This thing is your life on the line. It's going to be, you know, great front sight picture and press the trigger and keep pressing until the threat is gone. Another thing I want to talk about kind of briefly is pre-planning. Guys, I don't want you to be scared. I don't want you to go, well, I'm not going to go downtown, or I'm not going to go to a concert, or I'm not going to go to a ball game or a mall because I can be a terrorist target. Terrorists only win if you allow them to terrorize you. But you have to be cognizant of it. You have to be the fact that it could happen. Pre-planning is always a good thing, not just for a terrorist incident per se. What if you and your family are out and, you know, I grew up in Northern California, you know, the earth shook all the time. There were some big earthquakes. For years and years and years, you know, I was drilled, hey, look, if this happens, we get separated, the house comes down, you know, we're out somewhere. We always had a plan of where we were going to go and where we were going to meet up if we could get there. So always talk about that. What happens if you get separated? You know, I mean, I'm the father of two lovely daughters who, when they were little, it was like trying to herd cats sometimes, especially at a mall. As they got older, it was like, gee, Dad, can, you know, myself and my 5 friends want to go. We don't want Dad hanging around. Okay, we'll go to the mall. You be back here in 1 hour. and this is where we're going to meet. It's pre-planning. It's the same thing. Look, we get separated, something happens, we're going to meet in the parking lot out by the car if we can get there. One of the things I'm a big proponent of in your vehicles is a get-home bag. A get-home bag, I have them in all of my vehicles. They're a couple of days worth of water, food, medical supplies. A lot of stuff goes in them. They're a great, they're a great thing if you just break down alongside of the road. Here in Nevada, you get out in the middle of nowhere between towns here in Nevada and you break down, there is not a 7-Eleven within 200 miles. So you can't just go in and get a Slurpee. If you don't have water, you could be in a real problem waiting for somebody to come by. So, one of these get-home bags is very easy to put together. Contact Bob. I have a whole list of stuff that I put in my get-home bags. If you want to know more, contact Bob. I'll get him the list, and he can post on.
We can put it on the website.
Put it on the website or put it on the YouTube page. I'll get that out there. It's one of those things that, it's just being prepared. It's not being paranoid, And I wanted to say one thing. Let me digress just a second. When we were talking about fighting, I have a very, very good friend of mine is a former military special forces guy, and he said, when you get in a fight, always fight like you are the third monkey on the ramp getting into Noah's Ark and it's starting to rain. So fight like you're that third monkey. Your life depends on it.
This is different. We're talking about you're in the middle of a war.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, the more pressure that our military is really good at taking out bad guys. Even though the last few years we've been we've been really reluctant to do so.
Less than aggressive.
Less than aggressive. We've been more, well, we'll leave them alone. There's a new sheriff in town, and the new sheriff has got a hell of a deputy, and he's going to let the mad dog off the chain, and he's going to let this military. We have a wonderful military. God bless every last member of the military, because they're some of the most highly trained, best war fighters in the world. You let the war fighters fight your war.
Exactly.
And we have an administration now that will do exactly that. So, it's going to change. And the more pressure they put on these guys, the more incidents you're going to see away from Syria, away from Iraq, away from the Middle East. You're going to see attacks, and you're going to see them here. So really, it's about being prepared. Last week, Bob and I were talking before the show, and I was going to talk a little bit about it, and he decided we should probably do an entire show. Yeah. So, I don't know everything, but I've got some ideas, and I'll try to impart that to you. The company I work for now, Techstratics International, we do training. So we can do that. We do it for a lot of people, both law enforcement, military, and civilian training. But get training, whether it's from us or any good training facility, go get trained. I'm not asking you to be a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret or a military, infantryman. I'm asking you to get some training to survive and to save your life.
You need it. On that vein, we're getting on to, wow, we got like 5 minutes of airtime left. Some bookkeeping here at the end of this. We've got a couple of gun shows upcoming. Crossroads of the West Gun Show, August 26 and 27. That'll be this upcoming weekend, or 2 weeks. No, upcoming weekend. we will be there. I've got a table down there. If you want to pass for the show, you can send me an email to bob@firedupmail.com. I really don't have time to get them out for the next show. Hopefully, our websites will be back working. They're not working now, which is why I took the thing down. The next show after that, September 2 and 3 at the Sports Center. We will be there also. Next week, I've got California Nevada Firearms Attorney Don Green coming on again to talk about back to our normal format of issues. Training practice is so important, and I know, something just came to mind while Lenny was talking about training and tricks and things you can do. I took a class some years ago, and I used the information from a drill that was being run, and this British officer commander who was teaching the class, we're a bunch of firearms instructors and so forth, and he put out 3 targets. Now, he's a military guy, and the command was on the command, threat, draw your gun and put 2 rounds in each guy, because 1 round doesn't work, 2 rounds work, twice as good. And the first guy got up there and went ba-bang, 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 and he put 2 rounds in each guy. And the instructor looked at the class and said, "Anybody see anything wrong with that? You have 3 opponents." And he said, "Laddie, when you're putting 2 rounds in the first man and then 2 rounds in the second man, what do you think the third guy's doing while you're putting those 2 rounds in each of those guys? He's putting 2 rounds in you. Multiple targets in sequence, 1 round in each guy, and then come back to the first guy to see if he's fallen yet. And if he hasn't, obviously the tactics are different if you're in a war. This is not practice. This British guy, he spent some time in Northern Ireland and took a 30-06 in the edge of his head once, and that's why he was the man he is today. But they were dealing with the same thing. They were dealing with the IRA and just attacks from ambush all the time.
Yeah.
And terrorism hasn't changed. It's the same thing, but these guys are coming after you. They're coming after your families. Get some training, please. Back next week, we'll be set up again. Hopefully the websites will be up again, and we'll be there with Don Green, and I'm going to, wow, we're right up on the time now.
I get it. I actually get a week off or 2 since I've been.
You didn't pay me to be here. I wouldn't. We've just got to encourage you to stay alert. If you see something going on, please don't stand there and film it. Get out of the way and call 911. You may save a lot of lives. Las Vegas very likely will be a target, and we need to be prepared. You're the guy that's there.
Remember, you're the eyes. Law enforcement needs the eyes out there. If you see something that's suspicious, call local law enforcement. Okay? When you call them, they'll take care of it. Investigate it, and if it's nothing, it'll be fine. You could be saving a lot of people's lives.
Thank you again for watching Fired Up, and we will be back next week with Don Green and get back to our normal format. If you have a question or comment, you can hit my website and ask a question, and I will be happy to call you back. The phone numbers and so forth are there. The phone number for the office is still good. Look at last week's show. It's up there. And we'll take care of it or see you at one of the gun shows that's upcoming. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good evening.